Hey, and with this video, we're going to be resuming our clock and we're going to make it update live. So, so let's say we, so last time we saw that every time you have the app here, let's say it's here, right? So every time you open it, um, it's still going to be at the same time, but it'll only change when view to load is called, and if you remember, that's only when it's opening up for the first time. The view opens up for the first time. So if we kill it and then open it up again, it's going to have a different time. And I'm doing this by saying Command Shift H in my simulator. That's the same as pressing the home button. And then double tapping it is the same as double tapping your home button. So then I can kill it like that. And I click back here and I see a different time again. And that's because it's getting called every time it opens, the view to load is being called. So we want to actually make it so that every once in a while, perhaps every second, it updates. So we're gonna change the flow a little here, and we're gonna create a timer, which is Swift's way of updating something every once in a while according to a time. Every 60 seconds, maybe in our case every second, we can have something occur. So how about we say, well, so to make a timer, remember, let's make it optional, because we're gonna assign it later. So, or yeah, okay, so let's say var timer is timer. Timer is Swift 3's timer class instead of NS timer. So to do that, so now we can, well, how about we move this code into here. Or actually, let's keep this clock assigned way up here, because we only need one clock. We don't need to make the clock every time we update the time. So let's move this code also out of here into a separate function, and let's call it update time. Okay, so we have that code here. I cut and pasted it. So we have the code and a function now. So how about we call it every second or so? To do that, we can instantiate this timer from, remember, it's just a variable like anything else, so we can assign it with an equal sign. So, and because we set it as an optional, until we assign it, it's going to be nil, remember? And once we assign it, it's going to be made something. And this is just good practice. Something will never go wrong here, but if something can, it probably will. So that's why we have good use of optionals. So we can say timer.scheduled. Okay, so this is, remember, this is Apple's timer class with the capital T. Timer is our variable, and then Apple's timer class has a function called schedule timer, and that basically just gives us a timer. So there are a couple of ways we can use this, but how about we try using this one, because it gives us a time interval, which we'll set to 1 minute or 1 second, and then target, which we'll talk about in a second, and then all these other things. But so we're gonna say this one, and to auto complete it, I just hit enter, and so now I have time interval selected, here. So let's say 1.0, because we want every 1 second. So I'm going to tab to my next placeholder, and I'm going to say the target is self, because we want this method to be called on our class, our self. If you remember self from the past videos, it's basically just our object that we're currently in the view controller class. So I hit tab again to go to the next placeholder, and to make a selector, I say update time. A selector is kind of just a string, I guess, but, or, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, we don't have to do, I guess it's an update in Swift 3, we can do it like this now. Hashtag selector. So, actually, we don't have to have the controller here. But so, its selector is update time. So this is our method that we just made. So it's going to call this on our, it knows to call it on self, and it's going to call update time every 1 second. And so this stuff, user info, that's if we want to pass something called a payload into our function, but we don't want to do that yet. So we'll just call it nil. And repeats, we're going to say true because we want it to keep on updating every second. So if we run this, I just hit Command R, so it's going to run soon. And so we'll see what's happening. So you saw it update once, but why isn't the time changing anymore? How about we print out something here to find out. Time is being updated. So now it's going to print that every time that function is called. So you see it here, it's getting added to every 1 second. So it's just being, so it's getting bigger and bigger, yeah, because it's getting updated. But we see that we're updating it every second, but we're only showing up to minutes here, so what's going on? So we can change it, because we selected short, remember? So how about we try medium? And so this shows us it's updating every second, and that's great. But we saw that it shows up as 0000 the very first time. So how about right here we say we just call it manually the first time, so we don't have to wait 1 second for it to be updated the very first time around. So when you open it, it'll have an updated time, and then every second after that, it'll also be updated. So you see it now, it's working pretty well. It's updating every second, works like a charm. So what we can do now is some final touches, and we're gonna add a good practice called invalidating our timers. And so to do that, we can make a dinit, which you're not expected to know it yet. So basically, a dinit is called when a view controller is just being like destroyed by the supreme garbage collector of Swift. And because when there's lots of memory being used or something, and this view controller is just kind of like in the background, it's not actually being shown right now, it might be deinitialized to save some memory. So what we want to do in that case, we want to invalidate our timer so it doesn't keep on happening in the background, because this will keep on happening until you invalidate it. Even if you change to a different screen, it will keep on happening. So what we want to do is we want to say our timer dot invalidate. It just has a pretty simple method there. And remember, we have this question mark here because we don't know whether it's going to be, we don't know whether it might be nil, it might not be. So this is a short way of typing out all the way if let, or if timer not equal nil, timer dot invalidate. But we would still have to put the question mark, but in this case we know that it's not nil, so we could have done exclamation point. But so it's good practice because we don't have to type all of that. We can just put this question mark here. So now we have this clock that's working pretty well. And so one thing I want to mention is what happens when we rotate our phone. So to rotate a simulator, you use Command and then any of the arrow keys. So it's working pretty well. Actually, it still shows up in the place we want it to be. And that's because we had remember those nice constraints we added? We centered it horizontally, and then we set it to 110, I believe, with the space from the top. So we have it working pretty well like this. And so let's add some last color color and design changes, because users, especially for Apple products, are used to really good designs, and it really has to be user friendly. It has to be beautiful, honestly. So let's go back to our storyboard. That's where most of our colors are going to be, but not always. So let's change it to some sort of how about like this kind of color? How about that? So let's go to, so we're clicking on our view, right? And we want to change the background to that kind of color. So we go here, we click on the background color, and something that you honestly don't use a whole lot, but just for fun, because we want it to be this kind of color. So we can click the eyedropper right here, and you can honestly choose any color and it'll become that color. But since we want this kind of color, let's go here and click that. So that's a nice dusk kind of color. I like it. But then there's not a lot of contrast between this and the background, because this is black, this is like a dark shade of gray with a little bit of blue kind of thing. I like it. So, but because there's a little bit of blue here, why not make this like a kind of slick blue too? So let's make it something like, to change the color of a label, you can go up here. Let's try, you can go to other, lots of colors to choose from. About something like this maybe. Yeah, about that. I like ocean. But you can choose whatever color you want, of course. I like this color. And so we want to make it a little bigger, actually, too. Because, remember, it won't always say 000, but it'll be a little bigger, like, say, 9:41 a.m., and it'll show the seconds, too. But let's make this a little bigger. So we can go up here to change the font. And we don't really have to change the font to make it bigger, but fonts are cool to play with. So let's how about Futura? I've never tried that. So, and sweet medium style, you can change the style if you want, or something extra bold, interesting. So let's go back to medium. Okay, so let's change the size. Let's make it bigger. Okay, that looks pretty good now. 45. So now if we run this, it'll be with our new slick design that we have here. And so we open it, simulator's opening up. Hey, that looks pretty good. It's pretty good design and everything. I like the font. Okay, so one last thing we wanted to do, just to make it look a bit nicer, is that we see this status bar is still here. And we don't really need to show it. We have a better clock, cooler clock with a cooler font up here. So how about we get rid of the status bar entirely? Let's do that. So to do that, one second. I'm gonna try something. Yeah, so if you notice when we change to horizontally, we don't, the status bar goes away. That's just an iOS standard. It just goes away when you do that. Okay, so okay. So one second, I'm deciding what to do next. So, okay. So this is good. So how about we get rid of the status bar at all points? So let's do that. Okay, I'm done. Okay, so how about in the view to load, to get rid of the status bar? How about, I don't know it off the top of my head, so how about we Google it? So it's always good to Google stuff. It's pretty important. So how do we? So if we wanted to hide it for the entire app, we could do something like this, I guess. Yeah, so we can override this variable, so I'll talk about that in a bit. So this is Stack Overflow, by the way. It's a good tool to learn about your own things. Learn about anything you're curious about, or you have a problem, you have an issue, you have a bug that you don't know, you can always look in Stack Overflow. So let's add this variable. So when we run this, let's see what happens. But while it's running, I'll explain. So this is a variable, and we're overriding it because UI view controller, Apple's class, also has this variable, and it's probably set to false. But we want to change it to true, because as you see now the status bar isn't there. So that looks pretty good. And if you notice, just something funny, because we took this color, it actually blends in with our Xcode environment because it's the same exact color, right? So that's pretty cool. But so now we see that the status bar is gone because we overrided that view controller, UI view controller variable, and we set it to that we prefer the status bar hidden, and it's a variable that's Boolean, so we said true. Yes, we do prefer the status bar is hidden. So in this, we've learned that we can customize our design quite a bit actually, and if there are very like nitpicky things in iOS that we want to do, we can always check Stack Overflow and see what's happening. But so now we have a pretty good clock, and so we're going to be doing something in the next few videos. Haven't decided yet, but until then, thanks for listening.